Hello everybody and welcome to my little motion graphics demo here. My name is Alan Chisco. I'm a motion graphics artist, and today I'm going to show you a little bit about how I put together this little piece right here. This is an intro that I did for FIFA World Cup that's coming up in Germany in this summer. I'll just do a quick little playthrough so you can see what it's all about. Camera swoops in, curves around a little bit. We cut to another scene where a guy gets a goal, and then we cut to another scene, pull back, and have the logo reveal. So the general idea behind this was we wanted to do something, of course, that relates to soccer. And we chose to concentrate a little bit on the stadium side of things. Now, we talked about maybe using an actual fully rendered 3D stadium. But the production budget didn't really allow for the modeling of it and the render times and everything. So we decided that we would go for something a lot more graphical looking. If we go here, you can see that if you're cruising around a little bit, all these weird shapes that I created are, you could probably argue that they're sort of stadium-like. So that's what we went with. So I'm going to give you a quick little walkthrough about how I did this project. I'm not going to give you exact step-by-step directions. I presume that you know a little bit about 3D and After Effects. So I'll just be giving you a brief overview of everything that I did and the steps that I went about during the creation of this piece. So first thing we're going to do is go into 3D land. I'm using 3D Studio Max. You could probably set this thing up in whatever 3D application you happen to be using. So first thing I do is I go to the Create tab and over to Extended Primitives, and I'm going to create something called a torus knot. So I'm going to click right in the center of my scene and drag it, and we get this funny thing here, which does not look like a stadium at all. Go over to Modify here, and first thing I'm going to do is change the radius. We'll make that 316. I'll just type in all the different measurements that I've used. Go down to cross section here. 21 for the radius, 123 for the sides. You want to have a lot of sides for this thing so that it works properly. 6.3 for the eccentricity, and 53 on the twist. Now that still doesn't look like a stadium. Matter of fact, it looks about as far from a stadium as you can get. But in the torus knot parameters, there's a little thing up here called circle, which when we click on it, we end up with something that's a lot smoother and arguably sort of looks vaguely stadium-like. So that was the idea in coming up with the basic shape for the stadium-like 3D objects. Basically what I did is I created a whole bunch of those. I'm just going to delete that, and we will unhide everything. This is the actual scene that I ended up using. If we maximize the perspective window and zoom in and move around, you can see we sort of have kind of a Frank Gehry sort of a stadium there, all clad in titanium. I will bring the material window over. This is the material that I used. This is actually a standard Max material if you have it. It's called Metal Chrome. And I used that unmodified just because I liked the way that it ended up looking. So if we do a quick little render, that's sort of what it ends up looking like. So as you can see, I've got this one big shape out here that's a torus knot. I've got another shape in here which is just a modified torus knot. Same thing as the first one, except I made it a little bit smaller and made a different shape. Then in there I've got another one, and in there I've got even another one. So I ended up using 4 torus shapes, and I do also have 2 lights in the scene that I've used that I'm casting shadows with. So the next thing that we want to do here before we actually move into After Effects, because I want to be using the After Effects 3D space with the project, is I want to get the camera data from 3D Studio Max into After Effects. Now there's a couple of different ways that you can do that. First thing is that you could bring up your render settings, and when you render, you can save to what's called an RPF image file, this one right here. Now when you do that, I'm just going to select that here. You make sure that this little checkbox up here is checked, which is the Z. the coverage, and you want to store an alpha channel as well. Now when you do this, what happens is that After Effects saves sort of the camera data and everything, and then you can use your keyframe assistance if you have the Pro version of After Effects to create a camera out of it. Now I find that generally it's quite difficult and your results are pretty dodgy, seeing as how there are usually differences between how your 3D Studio Max world space and your pixel sizes and everything are compared to your After Effects world spaces. I generally don't have a whole lot of luck with getting things to line up really perfectly with camera data. So what I've done is I've gotten a plugin from this little place here called Boomer Labs. They make a little product down here called Max to AE version 1.5. I picked that up and I've been really happy with how it works. You can get just perfect camera movements, plus you can also map layers in Max plus lights in Max, and you can use them in After Effects, and they all just line up perfectly. It's really an indispensable plugin if you're using 3D Studio Max and After Effects together. So boomerlabs.com for that one. So the way that it works is you go over to your Create tab. Usually you've got standard primitives, extended primitives. When you open this up, you have another option down here when you install Max to AE called, strangely enough, Max to AE. So the first thing that you want to do is you want to create what's called a helper layer. So you just click on that, move into your viewport, click and drag, and make a layer. Now this generally does not render. You can select this so that it renders. And once you've got that, you've got this little button down here which is called Export Camera. So all you got to do is click on Export Camera, look at all of your options here, choose which ones you want in terms of the fields and the frames and all that. I'm just going to do the whole thing, and you choose which version of After Effects you've got. Now right now it's only up to After Effects version 6.5. I have been talking to them and they're working on a version 7, but in the meantime you've got to go 6.5. A couple of different ways that you can do this now. You can save the information to a file, and then you can open that up and bring that in, copy and paste it on another machine, or because I'm doing everything on this one machine, I'm going to send it to the clipboard. And now when I go over to my After Effects here, I'm going to create a camera. There's my camera settings. And it's going to tell me that I need to have a 3D layer. I'm just going to hit OK there, and then I'm going to edit, paste. Now when I hit my U key, the Uber key, you can see we got a whole bunch of keyframes. Now if I click and drag, you're not going to really see anything because, well, there's nothing to see up here yet. So the next thing I'm going to do is go back to my 3D Studio here, and I'm going to export a layer. So that was the layer that I created, this little helper layer here. Similar look for the export dialog box here. I'm going to send that to the clipboard and then go back to After Effects here. I'm going to create a solid. I'll call this helper so we can see that, and make that comp size. Hit OK. Now the next thing you got to do that's pretty important is you have to make it a 3D layer. So I'm going to click there, and you can see it looks sort of funny. And now if I paste, hit the U key, you can see that we've got all these other keyframes. And now when I move in, you can see that we've got, if we go back to Max, oh yeah, we're not in the camera here. Let me just go to my camera view. There we go. You can see that we've got the same move here now in After Effects. So it works great. I really love the Max to AE plugin. It makes everything line up just perfectly, and I love it. So at this point, generally what I do is I work in After Effects 7 now. I would save this project off. I would go into After Effects 7. I would import this project here, and then I would copy and paste my camera and my helper layer into the projects there, and I would continue with my compositing at that point. So here we are in After Effects. After Effects version 7 is what we're working in right now. Basically what I'm going to do here is I'm not going to go through and show you how to drop everything on and set all the different layers and all that, and all the positions and keyframes and all that. I'm just going to go through and show you how I set up the final project so you can see how it was all put together. Even if you look at the project, this is all it is. There aren't actually that many layers on here. It's quite simple when you look at it. The key to selling this whole thing was having a nice camera movement out of 3D Studio Max. So I will show you, however, how we bring in the camera data and everything, because that's a really important part of of the project. I was just showing you how to use Max to AE in 3D Studio. Now I'm going to show you how to get it into After Effects. So the first thing you want to do is in your project window, I'm just going to double click on there, and we'll go to the little file that I saved. This came from After Effects 6.5 because that's the only thing you can copy and paste data to in Max to AE right now, and I'm just going to import that. So we get a little file here. I'm going to open that up, Comp1, and here we've got what we were just looking at, our nice little move. So what you do is, all you got to do is copy the camera, go back to the scene that you want, and paste it in. And there you go. These two cameras that I have here are identical, so there won't be any change here. But if we were to turn off both cameras, you can see everything gets all funny and wacky because there's no longer any 3D data on where all the rest of the layers should go. So I'll just get rid of that. Now the next thing that you would have is you would have your helper layer here. Now if you hit the Uber key, the U key, you can see there are a whole bunch of keyframes here. Now these we don't really need, because you see if we click and drag along here, nothing changes on the position and orientation settings here because this layer in 3D Studio didn't move in terms of position or in terms of its rotation. So all the position and the orientation is the same. So the easiest thing to do in this case is just to select all the keyframes. You can do that by clicking on the words position and orientation. You can see they all get selected, and delete them. Now all you got to do is select these two I-beams here and edit, copy. Now if we go back to our main scene here, just for the sake of illustrations, I'm going to show you what happens. I'm going to create a solid here. We'll just call it temporary. Hit OK. Make it into a 3D layer like that. And it's oriented the wrong way. But when I go up to, remember I copy and pasted the position and the rotation I-beams over here. When I go back to here, select my temporary layer and paste. Now you can see it starts looking exactly like this layer does here. There we go. And if we were to go through here frame by frame, you can see that the position of this layer stays here perfectly. Now that's going to come in handy in just a couple of minutes when I start talking about the layers. I'm just going to delete that right now. So let's start at the bottom here and work our way up. I'm going to turn off the visibility of all these things. We'll go right down to this one here. First thing I would have done was bring in my 3D Studio renders, and this is what it ends up looking like. One of the things that I often like doing is I'll duplicate the background layer, just like this. And I'll turn off this one here, and you can see that we've got an effect on here. It's just fast blur. Give it a little bit of a blurriness here, 17 pixels, and put the other layer over it. Now this other layer has no effect on it at all. If we go to the transfer modes though, you can see that I've applied overlay transfer mode. If I go normal here, you can see it's just a regular 3D, but if I go overlay, you get sort of a softer, more contrasty sort of a look there. Now you can play around with all of your settings here. Sometimes hard light works really well, sometimes add. You get a whole bunch of different looks here. I chose to use overlay in this case. So the next thing that I did was I added an adjustment layer because I wanted to have a little bit more color here. We wanted to, the color scheme that we decided to go with, and we talked about this quite extensively beforehand, was green, which of course soccer pitch is green. And brown, just because green and brown, I don't know, they go nicely together. So those were the colors that we decided to go with. This is kind of an orangey sort of a brown, kind of a rust sort of color. So what I did is I created an adjustment layer, and I masked off the adjustment layer. You can see the mask right there. And I also feathered it quite a lot so that we get a nice soft gradation here. I then applied CC Toner, which comes with After Effects. You might have to install it separately. And you can see if we turn that off and on, we get a nice little, almost a sepia kind of look, just in the top half of our image here. So that's what we did, just to give a little bit more visual excitement to the image. So the next layer that I've got here uses null lens flare. Bring that up. So this is what the flare that I ended up using. You can go to, I believe it's www.redgiantsoftware.com, null lens flare. Again, this is another plugin that I have in my toolbox that I use all the time, not just for doing lens flares in the traditional way of like when you have a light in your scene and you have the sun coming in and everything. I find that it works really well just as an accent to make scenes look a little bit more interesting. I'll show you a little bit actually, let me just hit OK here and turn this on. And that's exactly what I did in this case. I was looking at the scene and I was thinking, well, that looks okay, but it sure is looking awfully sort of bright in the center and dark on the outside. I wanted to give a little bit of light up to the outside a little bit, just to give it a little bit more of a little more punch. So what I did is I chose Light Factory here, and instead of putting it way down here where it's really big and obvious, I hit it way up in the corner here. So all it does is suggests a little bit more light coming up in the corner of the composition here. And you can see as we go through here, that stays up there and it gives a really nice sort of a burn up to that corner that I quite liked, and sort of affects everything else here, including the toner layer. You can see it just kind of bumps it up a little bit. So that was my thinking behind doing the lens flare there. Xmalt, by the way, makes it into a 3D or not a 3D. It takes the alpha channel of the effect and composites it over your composition. So the next thing we have here is, I'll turn that on. We can't see it right now because we're not at the proper spot in the timeline. Some video footage. And there is a reason why we don't see it, of course. If anybody remembers, I turned off all my camera data. So we are actually looking at the layer. It's right there. But what I'm going to do is turn the camera back on. And there we go. That's what we're looking for right there. So this is the reason why we wanted to have the helper data right here, the position and the orientation that I've applied to position and orientation of this layer right here. So now when we move in and move out, this layer is going to be perfectly positioned. And I actually offset it a little bit just to give it a little bit more visual data, or visual information. And I also created a nice little mask here, so that I was puzzling over how to get the video image on. I could have done a push, I could have done a fade up, I could have done any of those things, but because there are so many circles in the composition, what I decided to do was, let me just solo this layer here, I decided to use a mask that opens up to reveal the video that I've got there. If I hit my U key with the mask layer selected, you can see I've animated the mask shape so that it's fully open there, and then at the start of the composition it's actually closed. So that's how I chose to transition between all the video clips right there. If I turn on the next video layer, I'll solo that as well so we can see it. That first video layer is there, and then in comes the next video layer just like that. And we'll turn on the next video layer, and that's actually there from the beginning. Boom, there's the first one. Goal! There's the second one there, and the third layer comes in. And when we take all of the solos off on that, I've also applied different transfer modes to these ones as well. Add transfer mode to the first one, hard light and hard light. I play around with transfer modes. Depending on the composition, some works better than others. And we've got sort of a nice looking composition with the circles there. Adds a lot more visual interest to the composition. So next thing, we're almost finished here. A couple more things that I've added. One thing that I often like to put on my compositions are some grid lines. Now there's a couple of reasons why I like to do this. One, I just like how they look. I think it adds sort of a nice kind of a technical sort of a look to things. But the other important reason that I put them on is to give a little bit of more of a sense of 3D space. As we move in here, you can see that I've positioned some of these grids in different layers height-wise on the Z-axis, so that as you're moving in, the parallax shift sort of gives you more of a sense of where you are in 3D space, especially when you've got a scene like this where you've got these stadium-like things. It's really hard to get oriented and to figure out where you are on the 3D space. So having these grid lines here gives just another visual clue that lets you sort of orient yourself in 3D space so that you know exactly where you are. So these are both pretty simple grids. All I did was applied the grid filter. Grid, where are we here? Generate grid. Play around with the different sizes, and then the important thing is to offset them in 3D space. So let's see, this is the big one here, position. And you can see that if you move this around, and we'll go to Y, as this moves up and down, you can see that it sort of sets off where you are in your space a little bit better. So no keyframes to those. I just created them. Transfer modes on both of them just to soften them up and put them into the background a little bit more. And those are the grids. And finally, towards the end here, I have the, actually it was all throughout, we'll turn it on. I've got the logo, FIFA World Cup Germany 2006. Again, no keyframes, that's there for the whole time. And that, because it doesn't move and it's lined up with the grid lines, really gives a good frame of reference to where you are in 3D land. So that's it. When you stop and take a look at it, it's actually quite a simple After Effects composition, and the project itself is actually quite simple. The important thing is coming up with a good camera move in 3D Studio and making sure that you've got some nice strong colors that work with things. So I actually created, was it 3 or 4 of these scenes, different camera moves for all of them, and I composited them all together into, see, there's scene 1, which we were just working on. There's scene 2, and then there's scene 3. And scene 2 and scene 3 are pretty much identical in their setups and everything. With the logo, the reveal, I did the same thing with the video clips that I used that actually reveals itself using circles. I used circles as a transition for many things just because it looks good. And then I used the old lens flare for a transition between each of the scenes. So there you go. That's my FIFA World Cup opener. Dun, 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 dun. Songs, music. The music would be coming later. And that gives you a little bit of idea of the thought that went into the piece, and a little bit of the technique that I used to make it look good. And hope that is interesting for somebody out there, and hope that inspires people to bigger and better things. And again, my name is Alan Schisko. I'm a freelance motion graphics artist. If anybody would like to take a look at some more of my work, you're welcome to go to my website, which is www.effector.ca. And hope everybody has enjoyed this presentation. Thanks.